Hey everyone, my name is Shazia Khan, and the unit that we'll be doing today is Law and Financial Crimes, R6187919, and the learning outcome we'll be doing today is learning outcome 3, which is to understand the regulation and commercial policy issues relating to white collar crime. And we'll be looking at that in more detail. So you've got an idea of what white collar crime is and how it impacts on commercial properties and on businesses. So before we go on to learning outcome 2, I just want to give you an idea of what we've done in learning outcome 2. So before we go on to learning outcome 3, sorry. So in learning outcome 2, we looked at understanding the impact of money laundering regulations on businesses and its international dimensions. We also looked at the money laundering regulations and money laundering methods as well. We looked at a definition of what money laundering is. So it's where criminals use it to make it look like the money they have is legitimately earned. So it's like dirty money, what they trying to make their dirty money clean. That's the whole point of money laundering. And we looked at the international money laundering regulations as well, AML. We looked at 2.1, which was to analyse the background of the UK Proceeds of Crime Act 2012 and explain offences under the provisions. And we looked at the Financial Action Task Force on Money Laundering, FATF, and why that was created and the recommendations around that. We also looked at the criminal way of life in regards to money laundering. We looked at the background of the UK Proceeds of Act Crime 2002 and what the legislation dealt with and why the legislation is so important. We also looked at the origins of POCA. The origins went back to 1971 and in the 80s and 90s and what was the importance of that act. We then went on to look at offences under the Proceeds of Crime Act 2002, which was 3 main offences, which is concealing, disguising, converting, transferring or removing criminal property from England and Wales. Section 327 of the Proceeds of Crime Act 2002. We looked at Section 328 of the Proceeds of Crime Act 2002, entering into or becoming concerned in an arrangement or knowing or suspecting that it facilitates the acquisition. The third category of offence under the Proceeds of Crime Act is acquiring, using or possessing criminal property under Section 329 of the Proceeds of Crime Act 2002. We then went on to look at evaluating the international dimensions of money laundering regulations and looked at Section 7 of the Proceeds of Crime Act 2002 and looked at anti-money laundering regulations in the EU and why that is so important. We also went on to look at the European Union and issues of the Money Laundering and Terrorist Financing Act 2010. We looked at the Criminal Justice, Money Laundering and Terrorist Finance Act 2021 and what the elements of that act was. We then went on to look at 2.3, which was looking at analysing the purpose of money laundering regulations. And we looked at the purpose of money laundering regulations, so anti-money laundering policies and procedures. We then went on to look at the purpose of POCA. So it was there to facilitate confiscation of assets obtained through criminal activity. We also looked at preventing money laundering, so it allows for sharing of information. We went on to look at 2.4, which looked at elements of the consequences of money laundering on society. So the societal impacts, what are the consequences of being prosecuted under the Proceeds of Crime Act, the 14 years maximum penalty and fines, We also looked at societal implications, so like impact on community, the negative effects of money laundering on the economy, such as, drug trafficking, money laundering, impact on institutions, the economic growth, promoting crime. We then went on to look at some money laundering cases, some famous money laundering case scandals. HSB money laundering scandal, the Danks Bank one, a popular one, and other ones in regards to that. We then looked at the elements. I referred you to some articles on money laundering that you could look at in your own time. So that was in regards to learning outcome 2. Now we're working on learning outcome 3, which is to look at understanding the regulation and commercial policy issues relating to white collar crime and why it's so important in regards to elements of white collar crime. So the indicative content is to look at what is white collar crime, development of statutory law in combating white collar crime, the complexities behind it, specialist juries, cybercrime, whistleblowing, risks, organisations, so what responsibilities do they have, remedies in white collar crime, civil and criminal penalties and defences. So key terminology, a little bit of what white collar crime is. Simply means crimes committed by middle class people, as opposed to blue collar crime. So video here is a video on what white collar crime is, the meaning and the types of impact and the impact of white collar crime in regards to anti-money laundering. So what is white collar crime? It's regarded, it's a crime that is non-violent crime, often categorized by deceit or concealment to obtain or avoid losing money or property or to gain a personal or business advantage. Examples of white collar crimes include things like security fraud, embezzlement, corporate fraud. It could be things like money laundering. Entities that investigate white collar crime include the Securities and Exchange Commission, SEC, and the Financial Industry Regulators, FINRA, and the Federal Bureau of Investigation, FBI, and also state authorities actually look at, looking at the element of investigating white collar crime. This term, white collar crime, some interpret the definition of white collar crime as only applying to offences committed by an individual, but others include the FBI, also consider white collar crime to cover large-scale fraud carried out by a number of people in a company or government organisation. So, it could be different elements of that. White collar crime that is part of an organised effort to boost a company is known as corporate crime. The FBI seeks tackling corporate crime as one of its most important issues due to the losses it can cause investors and the damage it can do. Financial crimes such as manipulating financial data, the share price of other factors, and to deceive investors is a common fraud, corporate fraud. The majority of fraud that does happen, corporate fraud, involves accounting schemes that are conceived to deceive investors, as we mentioned, auditors, and analysis about the true financial condition of a corporation or business by manipulating financial data, sharing price, or any measurement to inflate the financial performance of the business. In 2014, we've mentioned this before. Credit Suisse mentioned it before, pleaded guilty to helping US citizen avoid taxes by hiding income from the Internal Revenue Service and paid penalties of 2.6 million. Bank of America sold billions in mortgage-backed securities, tried to tried to properties with inflated values without proper collateral and agreed to pay 16.65 billion in damages. So there are loads of cases of corporate fraud out there. So types of white collar fraud, white collar crime, sorry. So you've got fraud, embezzlement, bribery, tax evasion, and money laundering. So there are various types of white collar crime that have developed over decades. And for example, at present, developments in the digital business world have made cryptocurrency a popular means of carrying out white collar crimes, whereas in previous years it was more likely to have been mail fraud or wire fraud. Similarly, the way the world's financial markets are now closer to each other than in previous years has produced more opportunities for people to invest worldwide. But this has also made it increasingly possible for people to commit fraud, also known as securities fraud, which we talked in the last learning outcome about, where they make gains by using false information to convince another person to buy or sell on the financial markets. Recent years have also seen developments in finance and technology that have prompted white-collar crimes such as computer-based cybercrime, healthcare fraud, and intellectual property crime, which relates to such as copyrights, patents, and trademarks. Some of the white-collar crimes that have been around for many years, as we mentioned, fraud. This covers situations where a person deceives another in order to make a financial gain. This could involve, to mention just two examples, persuading someone to invest in a bogus financial scheme or selling an item at a vastly inflated price by making false claims about its value. The next one is the type of crime is embezzlement, and this is where money is taken from a person or organization by someone who has a duty to act on their behalf. An example would be a financial advisor entrusted with a client's funds who then spends them on himself or other purposes they were not intended for. The next type of white-collar crime is bribery. So bribery is offering, giving, receiving, or requesting of money or any other items of value to influence the actions of an official or another person who has public or legal duty. We've got tax evasion, where an individual or company can be guilty of tax evasion if they conceal their income or other information about their assets from the tax authorities so that they have to pay less tax. This is not to be confused with tax avoidance, which is using legal ways of reducing the amount that a person or company has to pay tax on. And that would be looking at things like HMRC would be investigating that, things like tax and VAT investigations. And then you've got things like money laundering, which is a big element of it, is accepting cash earned from illicit activities such as drug trafficking and making the cash as appear as earnings from legal business activity. Criminals often filter money laundering from crimes such as human and narcotics trafficking, public corruption, and terrorism in a three-step process, which we mentioned before, which is placement, layering, separate the criminal's financial proceeds, and integration. If anyone is convicted of a white-collar crime, an individual may be sentenced to time in jail, depending on the severity of the crime. So it's really important to actually look at how severe the crime is. So it could be things like mortgage fraud, money laundering, as we mentioned, it could be elements of bribery and corruption as well. So these are some types of it. So now we're going to look at 3.1, which is analyze the historical development of white-collar crime and the role in statutory law with this. So white collar crime, as we mentioned, is a range of crimes that are committed by professionals who are either in business or government. It is a term that refers to crimes that involve deceit, concealment, or some abuse of trust rather than the use of threat or physical violence. The term white collar crime can be often be confusing for those without legal knowledge because it covers many different types of crime. The term itself was coined as back as 1939 and encompasses the full range of frauds committed by individuals, businesses, and government professionals. The history and evolution of white collar crime is an interesting one. While corruption is a hardly new concept, white collar crime as we know it today did not come about until well into the 20th century. Edwin Harding Sunderland coined the term white collar crime in 1939 to highlight his belief that law enforcement focused solely on theft and other criminal offences committed by lower classes, while ignoring the often shady practices of the elite business class. White collar crime. Sunderland in 1949, Sunderland detailed his beliefs in a book titled White Collar Crime. Sunderland's idea has to shift the focus from actual criminal offence to the perpetrators of the criminal offence. Since Sunderland's time, statistics have shown that white collar crimes are no longer perpetrated only by the elite business class. Rather, people from all walks of life committed white collar crimes. Many of today's sociologists believe another flaw in the Sunderland's idea is a failure to distinguish illegal criminal behaviour from deviant behaviour, meaning under Sunderland's definition, not all white crime is an actual crime under current laws. Paul Tampan, a lawyer and socialist, argues that the definition of white-collar crime should be limited to only that which is currently illegal under our laws. To combat the effects of white-collar crime from the US Congress passed numerous laws and statutes in 1970s, 1980s. The most well-known of this is the RICO Act, Racketeer, Influence and Corrupt Act. This made it easier to prosecute organisations that were corrupt and seize those assets of the corrupt organisations. Edward Sunderland came up with the term white-collar crime in 1939, as I mentioned. He said it meant a crime committed by a person of respectability and high social status in the course of their occupation. So he actually referred that it could be anyone, it could be, identified as anyone doing that. And he had, Sunderland had ever introduced the term white collar crime in the early 1920s and saw Charles Ponzi running investment fraud schemes that led to the term Ponzi still being used as a century later, so it's still being used now as Ponzi scheme. So this is the history, historical developments around white collar crime, and he looked at the elements of white collar crime and how it categorized it as an element of violation as well. The most over-the-top subsequent review of the white-collar crime characterizes its subject as demonstrations perpetrated by a company that I mentioned. The role in statutory law in dealing with white-collar crime. In the UK, there's no specific statute that deals exclusively with white-collar crime. Instead, a variety of laws govern different types of white-collar crime. For instance, the Fraud Act 2006 broadly addresses fraud-related crimes, including those committed in a corporate setting. For bribery and corruptions, the legislation in force is the Bribery Act 2010, which holds individuals and even corporations accountable for their misconduct. So as there's no legal definitions, there are acts that fall within that. The Fraud Act covers involving false representation, to cover a wider compass of fraudulent activities. The Bribery Act when it comes to financial crimes, the Financial Services Markets, FSMA, regulates professional conduct in the financial sector and has specific provisions for control of insider trading and other market manipulations. Additionally, for the embezzlement or misappropriation by trustees or company directors, the Theft Act 1968 contains specific provisions. Other relevant laws affecting business crimes include things like the Companies Act 2006, Data Protection Act 2018, and the Proceeds of Crime Act 2002, which is to name a few of them because they deal with all that. If a company director, and I'm just going to give you an example of application of UK's white collar crime legislation. So if a company director intentionally misrepresents the company's financial condition to enhance the company's stock prices and sells his shares at a profit, he could be prosecuted under the Fraud Act 2006 for fraud for false representation under the Financial Services Marketing Act in regards to it. So, you know, there are elements in regards to that. White collar crimes cases can be lengthy, complex, and involve a number of countries. Those suspected of such a crime can be investigated by law enforcement agencies. They may also be the subject of legal action, which is litigation brought by people who say they have suffered losses as a result of such crimes. When a white collar crime is suspected, it will be investigated by one or more of the enforcement agencies in the UK. Things like, you know, the Serious Fraud Office, Financial Conduct Authority, HMRC, for example. So 3.2, evaluate the role of criminal law in supporting prosecution of white collar crime. So since in the 1988, the SFO's job was to research and arraign the most any sort of crime that was happening. So, you know, they dealt with that in regards to any sort of research around that and any sort of reporting of any sort of crime. So the SFO, which is a serious fraud office, dealt with had to research the most genuine and complex charges of misrepresentation and debasement. Its standards for tolerated cases have remained to a great extent predictable, restricted to those who are authentically or legitimately perplexing, including considerable monetary misfortune to casualties or reputational misfortune to the UK, and which adequately draw in the more extensive UK public interest. The UK had set out on what turned into an effective and much plugged modernisation of its enemy of debasement laws in 2007. This finished in the Bribery Act 2010, which came into force in July 2011. Simultaneously with the administrative changes, the serious fraud offices' insightful assets were being coordinated towards managing claims of memorable, possible degenerate lead checked out through the eyes of somewhat less present day previous enactment. This clever methodology pulled in analysis both from judiciary and the more extensive public ruler Justice Thomas in respect clarified that once in a while would be fitting for corporate culpable of such a genuine kind to be managed via civil recovery order. So, you know, the FSO's element of that is that it's accountable for any sort of prevention of white collar crime. While any white collar crime that has been committed can be investigated, this will only happen if it is known. There may be situations where the company has noticed white collar crime committed under its roof, but does not notify the authorities. A company may decide not to report that what has happened in a variety of reasons. It may rightly, as we mentioned, or wrongly believe it can deal with the matter internally. The company also concerned with the damage to its standing in the marketplace, as we mentioned, reputational. And if it became a crime has been committed, it may also fear the cost of having to pay financial penalties after investigations. But such a course of action can be dangerous. Not reporting a crime can create legal problems for the company if and when the authorities do eventually become aware of the wrongdoing. A company takes what can be a huge and very costly gamble by not reporting the crime. So it's really important that is, reported. White collar crime is non-violent, as we mentioned, categorized by deceit, concealment to obtain or avoid losing property or to gain a personal advantage. Customer complaints, whistleblowers, and other sometimes completely unrelated issues can lead to authorities scrutinizing the workings of a company. If they then detect the white collar crime that the company had tried to hide, the repercussions could be serious. So it's really important that this is all dealt with. White collar in 2020-21, the serious fraud office identified new cases. It completed 2 DPAs where a company admits to wrongdoing and agrees to meet certain conditions to avoid prosecution. That's how the companies involved, paying a total of 47.4 million and in penalties and costs. In the same year, the FCA imposed financial penalties totaling 189.8 million and opened 134 new cases. At the end of this period, the FSA had 593 cases ongoing. That's a huge value of cases ongoing. So 3.3, critically analyze civil remedies in the context of white collar crimes. So the FSCs transmit to secure buyers of money, administrations, and guarantees that the monetary sectors work well. It can manage offence utilising the common administration or criminal powers from the point forward. Progress has been consistent beginning around 2009, the FSA got more than 20 criminal feelings against people and kept on using its administrative powers with tedious and asset escalated criminal indictment was not fitting. The FSC proceeds in a similar wrinkle. It took on various criminal examinations from FSA and has since initiated its own. To the extent it keeps on overwhelming Ascentis, most as late as Swiss Bank and Nigerian Bank, to issue the extent the criminal authorization is concerned with OFAT's issues. The Enterprise Act 2002 enabled the OFT to indict people from taking part in cartels. Civil remedies. So in addition to criminal prosecution, civil remedies may also be available in cases of white collar crime for individuals and organizations to file wild suits, lawsuits. So remedies could be things like common remedies, criminal prosecution. So here, where individuals engaged in white collar crime may be subject to criminal charges. Prosecution can lead to convictions, so resulting in penalties such as fines, restitution, imprisonment. The severity of punishment depends on the nature and extent of the crime. Civil lawsuits, victims of white collar crime, including individuals and businesses, may pursue civil lawsuits against perpetrators to recover financial losses. Successful lawsuits can result in monetary judgments that compensate victims for damages. Restitution, this is where courts may order perpetrators to pay restitution to the victims, requiring them to reimburse the financial losses and suffered by the individuals. Also, asset forfeiture. Authorities may seize the forfeit assets acquired through illegal activities. This can include funds, real estate, vehicles, or valuable assets. Regulatory actions are things like, civil remedies could be regulatory bodies such as the Securities and Exchange Commission, SEC, or the Federal Trade Commission, FTC, may take administrative action against individuals or organizations. Compliance programs. In response to white-collar crimes, businesses and organizations may implement or enhance compliance programs, and this is a civil remedy as well. These programs are designed to ensure adherence to the legal and ethical standards, detect potential misconduct, and prevent future violations. Another remedy would be whistleblowing protections. So legal protections for whistleblowers who report white-collar crimes can encourage individuals within organizations to come forward with information about fraudulent activities. And whistleblowing programs may also offer financial incentives and reform and legislation. So governments may respond to white-collar crimes by enacting new legislation or enhancing existing law. Public awareness and education. So, making public aware campaigns and educational programs help individuals and businesses to prevent white-collar crime. Some penalties include victim restitution, steep fines, prison time, property forfeiture, as we mentioned. Some common defences are 3.4, analyse the defences available and to what extent these can be developed. So the OFT described the inability to acquire more indictments to the trouble demonstrating deceptive nature regardless of the way that no challenged case preceded the courts. Things might be going to change. April 2014 will likewise proclaim a change to the cartel offence, eliminating the necessity to demonstrate untrustworthiness. Rather, the cartel's offence may be submitted by people who concur with contenders to ensure against serious conduct, except if fitting advantages were taken to advance these arrangements. Common defences, as we mentioned, hefty penalties because many crimes involve harming, and victim. The other ones we looked at were victim restitution, steep finances, prison time, forfeiture. Some common defences, taxes used against against white-collar crime include entrapment, which actually means sometimes law enforcement will use tactics to uncover a crime that is being committed. Police sting operations and undercover police can work with a tenuous balance between lawful and unlawful activity in obtaining evidence. The use of threats, fraud, or harassment to coerce someone to commit a crime they would not ordinarily commit may occur. Entrapment is when a police officer induces or persuades someone to commit an offence that the person would have not committed otherwise. If you can prove that you have committed the crime without the influence of an undercover officer, you could argue you're entrapped. Lack of intent is the next one, which is lack of intent is a strong defence against a white-collar crime charge, because most white-collar crimes are crimes of intent. There are two key elements in offence: engagement in an illegal act, and number two, intending to knowingly undertake the prohibited action. The prosecution must prove that the defendant acted with intent to defraud or illicitly obtain money or advantages. If they can prove intent, the defence can argue that the case has no validity and should be dismissed. The next common defence is illegal search and seizure. Evidence must be obtained legally or it can be thrown out. The defence can investigate and question the incorruptibility of the investigation and the search and seizure process. The next one, statute of limitations. So criminal charges must be brought forward within a certain amount of time, which is known as statute of limitations. The defence can raise this as defence if charges are not filed within the applicable time limits. Intoxication. This is if the person was drugged or intoxicated during the crime and the inebriation was involuntary in order for the person to commit the crime. This can be used as a defence. For example, if a person is given drugs without their knowledge or consent and they then shares confidential company information, they can argue that they are not guilty of insider trading because they were coaxed by another party to disclose the information while involuntarily intoxicated. Coercion and duress, another really important element. There may be instances where a person commits a crime because he or she was forced, either through physical or verbal threats. If so, the defense attorney can argue the defendant acted in duress. If a person received a message that their family would be hurt unless they committed a crime act, they can argue that they only committed the crime out of duress and external pressure. Insanity. A person can fight to prove they are not responsible for their criminal conduct because of mental illness or defect they have, or at the time of the offence. In this defence, they must prove that the defendant has a substantial diagnosed mood, thought, or behaviour disorder. Insanity plea is not absolve a defendant from guilt or dismiss, and the criminal charge is instead the defendant still faces criminal penalties but can be remanded to a mental institute and provided mental health support. So whistleblowers in preventing white collar crime. Whistleblowers in preventing white collar crime, why that's so important. Sorry, just 1 minute. Whistleblowers are they can communicate with the police in regards to any issues around any sort of wrongdoing, and they are tipping off the individual in regards to any sort of financial crime that's existing. The Corporate Crime Observatory, CCO, is constantly engaged in supporting protection of fundamental rights against any form of violation of abuse. Over the past 2 decades, whistleblowers have been proven to be a crucial tool in combating any sort of persuasive and obscure forms of criminality, such as corruption, as they allow for the exposure of criminal phenomena that would otherwise not be to the attention of the authorities and society at large. So there is a need for these, and protection needs to be put in place for them. Despite this essential activity, especially in a democratic context, whistleblowers are not adequately protected and often face severe reprisals and violations of fundamental rights. Whistleblowers are legal or natural persons who report, disclose, or expose information about illegal, unethical, fraudulent, or dangerous activity, practices, or policies within an organisation or institution, whether public or private. This information may be related to financial impropriety, public safety concerns, things like environmental violations, health hazards, discrimination, or any other misconduct that is harmful to the public or to the well-being of individuals. A whistleblower may make their disclosure internally to their employer or externally to the law enforcement, government agencies, or the media. The act of whistleblowing is protected by various laws, policies, and regulations, and whistleblowers are generally shielded from retaliation, including termination, demotion, harassment, or discrimination for their actions. Whistleblower protection laws are essential for ensuring transparency and accountability in government and private sector organisations, and whistleblowers help prevent disasters, facilitate accountability, and uphold transparency in democratic institutions. They're there to fight any sort of corruption, detect internal fraud, highlight regulatory divergence, and identify those who would act to damage the organization's credibility through any sort of acts that are illegality. They may, they are important in regards to, trying to identify any sort of illegality that's occurring within an organization. Real-world examples of white-collar crime, examples, Enron Corporation, WorldCom, Bernie Madoff, Instock, Adelphia Theatre, Tyco, Health South, and Jack Abramoff. These are some white-collar crimes in regard to examples of white-collar crimes that happened in regards to, the issue of white-collar crime, the that it's happened in regards to, so it could be things like embezzlement, it could be things like, fraud, it could be, the fact that there are some major cases that have dealt with white collar crime. There was the one of Iran, the collapse of the energy company Iran in December 2001, which precipitated what would become the most complex white collar crime investigation FBI's history. And when, in this case, when Iran declared bankruptcy in December 2001 and took with its nest eggs of thousands of employees and stockholders, the FBI Houston field office assigned 2 agents to investigate. Within weeks, the number of agents, support staff assigned to the case grew to 45, many handpicked from field offices around the country for their expertise in traversing even the most circuitous trails. In January 2002, agents executed a consent search of Iran's 50-story corporate headquarters building. The search lasted 9 days as investigators unearthed critical documents and emerged with more than 400 boxes of evidence. At the time, agents conducted more than 100 interviews that helped identify fresh leads for investigation. In February 2002, Iran's board of directors issued findings from its own internal investigation, the Powers Report, named for William Powers Jr., head of the Special Investigation Committee that wrote it, and said Iran executives reaped billions by using a web of partnerships to generate false profits and hiding Iran's true debt. The powers of the report was a gold mine, said retired supervisory special agent Michael E. Anderson, who led it. So this was one of the examples of white collar crime in America, and it was quite a big white collar crime in regards to accountability issues. It was revenues over 150 million, and there's a list of others there that you could look at. So in conclusion to learning outcome 3, white collar crime is committed by people usually in positions of power and authority, and they use their knowledge and position to commit crimes. Some people do it for the thrill and money, and because they think they will get away with it. People should be aware of the types of fraudulent scams to stay safe from white collar crime. Should not give out personal information like social security numbers or bank account numbers to anyone unknown or trustworthy. And that's one of the elements of it. White collar crime is very it's very specialist type of crime, and it is people are very intelligent to be doing that, in regards to how they commit that crime, whether it's still going on in today's society. It's one of the elements of the crime that's still happening, and it involves a wide range of stuff, like we said, manipulation, cartels, securities, fraud, embezzlement, so it does happen. And it does happen within a corporation, so it's still ongoing. And in today's society, there are recent white collar crimes like Robert J. DiIBL, so it's still an ongoing thing that's still happening quite a lot. So these are some of the references for today's session that we've used. So Hopton D 2020, Money Laundering, a concise guide for all businesses, Routledge, Kasim, role of public auditors in fraud detection, a critical review, different strokes for different folks, examining the differing approaches to the offence of theft in the UK and Singapore, Limi, uprooting the invasive IV, reversing effect of dishonest appropriation, Masindro, global financial crime, terrorism, money laundering, Middleton, legal and practical perspectives of human trafficking. So to finish off, we finished off learning outcome 3 now. The next learning outcome we'll be doing is learning outcome 4. And we've looked at the different elements of white collar crime today in learning outcome 3, and also in learning outcome 2 we looked at money laundering, and there's a link between both as well. There are lots of ebooks and journals on Moodle that you can refer to for this unit. This recording will also go onto Moodle with the slides. And if you have any questions, please refer to the articles on Moodle. If you have any questions in regard to the learning outcome or the assignment or anything, you need to email learnerwork@ukvarsity.co.uk. Submission of the assignment to be done on learnerwork@ukvarsity.co.uk. And the next learning outcome that we'll be doing is learning outcome the learning outcome 4, and then it will be the session in regards to assignment discussion. And learning outcome 4, we'll be looking at understanding the development of global financial crime and the international initiatives in regulating this, because as we mentioned in the conclusion, there's so much increase in financial crime and white collar crime, money laundering, fraud, embezzlement, both nationally and globally. And there are laws and regulations being put in place to try to prevent any sort of crime occurring. So we've finished now learning outcome 3. The next learning outcome, as I mentioned, is learning outcome 4. If you have any questions, again, and I reiterate this again to you, please refer to learnerwork@ukvarsity.co.uk, and please refer to your ebooks and journals, any sort of other additional resources on Moodle. And also, if you have any questions, just email. Thank you for attending today's session, and I will see you in the next session.